Now we can get in to the good stuff. Understanding the pieces of a Cisco voice network. The stuff up till now has been a historical look at voice, which is the voice that was and the voice that is primarily in our world today and will be there for quite some time, which is why we need to know about it and integrate with it. But it's definitely not new. It's been around for decades. So as we move into this world, we're now going to see what's new, what's coming to the table. Now, earlier in the series, I talked about why people are moving to voice over IP and the advantages of it and so on, so I'm not going to spend time on that. What I'd like to do is focus on how Cisco integrates into this network. What does Cisco bring to the table? I'll start off with the Cisco voice infrastructure model, which is all about how our Cisco devices can connect in and how to design the network. It's kind of OSI model-ish in a way, but really shows you where all the pieces fit together. We'll then get into the Cisco call processing options, which really focuses on what powers the voice over IP network, what brings the intelligence, where do you do your configuration. I'll then look at all the applications that you can add on to get different features on your network that may not exist in the base call processing model. Well, let's start off by looking at the building blocks of a Cisco voice over IP network. That's what this infrastructure model is all about. This model was created by Cisco to describe every voice network that you can create, well, with Cisco gear or any other gear. Essentially, they created 4 distinct layers. And I said this was kind of OSI model-like in the sense that there's layers, but that's about it. We have the infrastructure layer, which is all of the different devices that comprise the network infrastructure itself. These are your firewalls, your routers, your switches, all of the things that allows network traffic to go back and forth to all the places it needs to reach. Now, the infrastructure has to be geared in a way to support the voice over IP network. And this is a lot of why Cisco got into voice over IP. By doing this, they not only are in a huge new market that's going to have a lot of visual sight by just about every business, but every single piece of network gear that Cisco sold years ago is probably going to have to be upgraded because it needs to support the new quality of service settings, needs to support like power over Ethernet, it's going to need to support voice VLANs. We'll talk about all these things in a little bit, but the old equipment doesn't do that. So you may be looking at a network infrastructure upgrade. Infrastructure, one set of equipment. You then move up to the call processing layer, and this is where you have the control, the mind, the processing power that's going to run the voice over IP network. This is, and I will never stop calling it this, Cisco Call Manager. It's the old name, but it's the name that has been around for so long. Have you ever known somebody that's changed their name? I have. There was a friend I had who changed her name to something else. Her first name was something else. And this was, I don't know, 6 years ago she changed her name. And when I see her, I look at her and I'm like, that's not your name. Like I have to force myself to say her new name rather than her old name because it's stuck in my head. And it's the same way. They changed Call Manager to be now the Cisco Unified Communication Manager, which is a lot longer than Call Manager, and that's probably what's keeping me from saying it. But the Call Manager is the mind and the brains behind the whole network. It's what runs the network. Now, Call Manager is a pretty big call processing solution, can scale to tens of thousands of phones, which some businesses don't need and frankly can't afford. That's why Cisco came out with these two pieces right here, the UC500 and Unified Communications Manager Express. These are small-scale platforms that do essentially the same thing as the Call Manager does, except in a smaller scale environment. You're looking at somewhere around 100 to 200 to maybe 500 phones if you're really pushing the limits of this guy. But well, no, you're not. No, you're around 200 phones or so. So you can, I guess, stretch the limits, but it's primarily geared around a small processing environment. The point is, this layer has all of the call processing devices that will run your voice network. I'll talk about the specifics of all of them in just a moment. Now, before I just go layer by layer, I want to make sure I mention this model represents a massive benefit of voice over IP compared to PBXs and in the old days of voice. In each one of these layers, you have a vendor neutrality which is going to be great. What I mean by that is your infrastructure could be some, I don't know, again, I don't know why you would not use Cisco for this, but say you do, you decide to use a different vendor. This could be all, we'll say it, Nortel equipment, Nortel switches, Nortel routers. You may, throw in a, what am I thinking? Not an ASA firewall, but a sonic wall. I see a lot of those lately. A sonic wall, and you can use any vendor you want. The call processing layer doesn't care. And you know what? You could use some heathen brand call processing equipment in Cisco IP phones. The idea behind this design is that all of these different layers can use different vendor equipment, and it all communicates because we're using standards-based protocols. Now, I'm getting into what I talked about in one of the first nuggets of this series, which is the advantages of voice over IP, but that's why they design these layers like this. Now, above the call processing is the applications, and these are servers that add features that the call processing layer can't do, like voicemail, like massive conference call applications. Call processing layer can do conference calls. It can even do big conference calls. But when you get into like video conference calls or 1,000 people on the same conference call at the same time, you've exceeded the base functionality of what you could do with the call processing layer. So call center applications, 911 services, like a tracking server that allows you to track users as they roam around the network, which couldn't be done in the old days. You couldn't unplug a phone and move it elsewhere. It wouldn't work. But now in voice over IP you can, so that plays havoc with 911 services. So you may need an extra server for that. Above the endpoints is the applications is the endpoints, and these are the devices or endpoints themselves that can communicate into the voice over IP network. Expect to see things here that you never thought possible. Like, people are used to phones, right? You got an IP phone sitting on your desk. Woohoo! It looks cool. It, got a display screen and all that. But people aren't used to their cell phone working as a voice over IP device. But they can. Nowadays, new cell phones are being manufactured that can do voice over IP capabilities. People aren't used to video phones or their instant messenger able to call somebody else's desk extension. And I'm expecting this layer up here to grow more and more and more. You're going to see all kinds of wacky applications that act as endpoints that you never thought possible to integrate into a voice over IP network. Now that we've seen the model and the layers, let's dig a little deeper into the specifics of those layers. I'm going to jump right over the infrastructure part because you know that. You know routers and switches. That's part of the core CCNA curriculum in CCENT. You know what they're there for and what they do. Now I'll talk about some of the additional functionality when we look at the network infrastructure itself later on in this series. But for here, I'd like to start with the call processing layer. This is the devices that can run your voice network. They're the mind, the brain. This is where you'll do most of your configuration. The first one is the smallest, UC500, or the Unified Communications 500 box. This thing is incredible. Now, I'm not saying that just because I say things like that. I'm saying seriously, it's awesome. It is a router. It is a switch. It is a wireless access point. It is a firewall. It is a VPN concentrator or VPN termination device that can run VPNs, and a voice over IP system all in one box. It's awesome. I look at this box. I'm looking at this picture on your screen. I'm just like drooling. Like literally drool is running out of the corner of my mouth. This thing is amazing, but you pay the price for it, which is why I'm drooling. I don't have one because it's fairly new in the industry, and right now I can't find one cheaper than a few $1,000s. You're looking at $2,000, $2,500, $3,000 for this little box, and I can't justify it. I have all the individual devices. I just want one. So before I dig into the details of this, quick note. Name change in progress. UC500 may be the artist formerly known as UC500. It is now being called, or starting to be called, the Cisco SBCS, which stands for the Smart Business Communication System. So you're going to see, I think, over time, or maybe even by the time you see this nugget, you're going to see that the UC500 has changed into SBCS. I think it's just, marketing people at their best. So this box supports 8 to 48 phones. Now the range is in there because when you buy the box in its native form, it comes with a built-in switch that has power over Ethernet, meaning it can power the phones that you plug in, that supports 8 devices. Now you can trunk this guy up here, plug it into a extra switch and start getting more ports and more ports and more ports. You can add on ports to get up to 48 devices. So you can see right there it's geared for a small business environment as an ultimate. I mean, but think of this. Think of it. I can't get over this. Look at this box. Imagine pitching this to a small business. If you're a consultant like me, you pitch this to a small business and you say, hey, for $2,500 or whatever bucks. I'm just like price, notwithstanding, right? Just throw money out there. You're going to get a router, a voice over IP system. You're going to get a VPN, a firewall. It's everything. It's amazing. It's cool. And it's not loud. I have, by the way, a rack of equipment behind me right now that is just humming all day long because it's loud. It's a rack of equipment. This is not loud. Not loud at all. All right, I'm getting off the UC500, right? So this has integrated voicemail. Look at that. Integrated voicemail and an auto attendant. Isn't that unbelievable? I totally forgot to even mention that. I mean, usually when we get into the other stuff, you're going to see extra voicemail servers, auto attendant systems, blah, blah, blah. It's everything. Okay, now really, I'm getting off my box. But look, no, just kidding. External music on hold port. You see this little port right here? It's what do you call those? Headphone jack. You plug in a headphone jack into it. You can plug an iPod into there. You can plug a little CD player, whatever you want, and that will be your music on hold. Keep in mind that you have to have a broadcasting license or pay the FCC if you want to use copyrighted music. So most of the time you're thinking Muzak, the free stuff you get from the internet that sounds like the real stuff. You also have FXO and FXS modules in there. Now, we haven't talked in depth about those. That's these guys right here and these guys right here. It only comes, this is an add-on module right here. These are built in. These are modules for external analog connections, like, for instance, bridging off to the PSTN central office. So those are your outside phone lines that come in. And this is meant to be a key system, a small system. So we're not talking about digital, although it does have a support for an add-on T1 module if you'd like to do that. It can also have an FXS module, like this one maybe. Actually, I think that's FXO, but usually FXS is pink. Kind of a pink color. But either way, if this was FXS, you could plug external phones or a fax machine or modems or whatever legacy analog equipment you'd like into this box. As I mentioned, routing and NAT support, so it's your router, it's your internet access. It's VPN support up to 10 users, again, small business. Optional 802.11 wireless, and you can get whatever 802.11 standard you want. So, okay. I'm stopping here or else I'm going to jump back onto my soapbox on how cool this box is. There's a complete section later on the UC500, aka Smart Business Communication Systems, aka Box That Rocks, that we'll talk fully about it. So I'll save some of my enthusiasm till then. So the next layer up, as your business grows beyond those 48 users that the UC500 supports, you'll move into Unified Communication Manager Express, or you may move into this. What this is for is essentially the next step up from the UC500 system. Maybe. You can see, and I say maybe the next step up, because you can see that depending on what router you have, you may not even be able to support as many phones as the UC500. This is designed to take an existing router platform, so your Cisco 2801 router that you have here, or whatever existing router that you have, and add call processing functionality. Now it does support a few additional features from the UC500, nothing major, primarily just some email integration and things like that the UC500 doesn't do, but primarily the same thing, same features as the UC500. The difficulty that I'll say with Call Manager Express is there will be a learning curve on the configuration. The UC500 is meant to be the ultimate all-in-one device for somebody who's not super Cisco savvy, who doesn't get into the command line every day, who isn't familiar with iOS commands. The Call Manager Express platform spends plenty of time in the iOS. Most of your features are configured via command line. Now, there is a way that you can use a GUI, but the GUI, the graphic interface for Call Manager Express, isn't anywhere near as pretty as the UC500 or allow you to configure as many features. So it's a little bit limited in that sense, but able to scale, depending on the router that you have, to potentially many more different devices that you can support. Now, inside of this, you can add Unity Express, which is an add-on module for the Call Manager Express. You can either have it be, well, I'll talk about Unity Express later. Essentially, it's your voicemail. It's a small, scaled-down voicemail system that sits inside of that router. Now, this runs on just about any Cisco Integrated Service Router platform, or ISR. That's all of these, and this is all the models that currently support Unity Express. And it mostly is command line configuration. Matter of fact, the majority of this series will be spent, well, I won't say majority, a lot of this series will be spent focusing on the command line configuration of Call Manager Express. Once you outgrow the Cisco Unified Communication Manager Express, or CME platform, you'll then move into the Unified Communication Manager Business Edition. This is, I would say, the new, well, next to the UC500, the newest one to the block that fits a niche in the market that Cisco's been missing for a while. There's always been, well, I'll say recently been, Call Manager Express, which, or communication, I gotta get used to that, Communication Manager Express, which is designed for the small business up to around 200 users max, depending on the size of the router. And then you move into Cisco Call Manager, or Communication Manager, that scales into tens of thousands of phones, but also costs tens of thousands of dollars. Somewhere in the middle of that is this kind of mid-size market that Cisco has just been missing up till now. That's why they came out with Communication Manager Business Edition. This one scales up to 500 IP phones and uses the same engine that runs the Cisco Unified Communication Manager Full Edition. This is the same GUI, the same graphic interface that you'll use when you move there. So there's, when you upgrade to the full-blown edition, there's no need to relearn anything. It's the same stuff. It's just now you can scale to many, many more phones. Now, the beauty of this box, the Business Edition, is that it runs 3 applications in one solution, all in one box. You have the Communications Manager, which is this. It's what powers your phones. Unity Connection, which is a slightly scaled down version of Cisco Unity, the voicemail system. Bigger than Unity Express, which is on the router in UC500, but not as big as full-blown Unity, which is what you'd use typically in the Call Manager solution up here. And it's all sitting on one box. And this is why I put great, but no redundancy. That's the big drawback to the Business Edition, is this is a single server solution. If that single server goes down, you lose your phone system, your voicemail, and I didn't even mention this, the Unified Mobility. That is a system that allows you to track users and give location and status information, whether they're on the phone and all that kind of stuff, and report back to other users and applications. So you lose everything if you lose that one box. If you want the redundancy, you then need to scale beyond this 500 limit solution into the full-blown Call Manager. Now, speaking of the full-blown Call Manager, here it is. Call Manager, or Unified Communications Manager, does one thing, and that is act as a call processing server. It doesn't do voicemail, it doesn't do outside applications and things like that. It is a server dedicated to just running the Cisco IP phones on the network. Now, because it's dedicated, you can actually scale this guy up to 60,000 IP phones per cluster. Now, when I say cluster, that means a group of servers all supporting Cisco IP phones. You can have nearly as many clusters as you want, so that makes the amount that you can scale virtually limitless. The beauty of using the Communications Manager instead of just the Business Edition is that you primarily get the multi-server redundancy and multi-site support that Business Edition barely supports. It doesn't support multi-server redundancy at all. But multi-site support and multiple clusters, it's just not there. The Business Edition is meant to be a small office, medium office solution, kind of an all-in-one box. The problem, if it's a problem, for some people it's not, is this is the show me the money solution. Meaning, think Jerry Maguire in this case, show me the money. This is where the costs really shoot up because you're buying dedicated servers for everything. And this is like anything in the voice technology realm. The bigger you get, the more specialized the devices get, and the more it costs. That being said, Unified Communications Manager is Cisco's flagship server box. It comes in two different versions, Windows and Linux. Now, Windows is the 4.x versions of Unified Communications Manager, and Linux is the 5.x, soon to be going away, and 6.x versions that are out there. Now, normally when you see versions like that, it's like, oh, well, upgrade, Linux, that kind of thing. But Communications Manager applies a different logic in that the 4.x versions will be around for quite some time to come. Because remember, people are moving from a PBX world into Unified Communications Manager. It's not every day you just go switch out PBXs. They just kind of run forever. So in the same way, many people have been using the Windows version of Unified Communications Manager. So if it's not broke, why fix it or why change it out? So you'll see the Windows version stay around for quite some time. The beauty is that the Windows and Linux versions use very, very similar concepts. It's just the look and feel is a little different. Windows version manages through Internet Explorer only, whereas Linux is any web browser because you're definitely less of a Windows tie in that case. And there are some features supported in the Linux versions that aren't supported in the Windows version. Linux is definitely, or I should say the appliance model, because you don't actually deal with the Linux underpinnings of Call Manager. That's where everything's going, but it's going to be a long time before we get there. Now we change gears from the call processing layer up to the applications layer. At the applications layer, you have many different applications that can add functionality to the voice over IP network. First, we'll start off with the most essential for any voice network, and that's voicemail. We have three different flavors of Cisco voicemail that's out there. You've got Cisco Unity Express, which is the one that runs inside of a router and supports up to 100 users. That's the scalability. Now there's two different versions that it comes in. There's the network module version and there's an AIM module version. The network module is, if let's say you've got a 3600 series router here, not that that's what you would run it on, just that's a very common form factor. Let's say a 3640. You've got a module here, module here, module here, and module here in a 3640. So if you buy the network module version, it's literally a plug-in module of Unity. You got your little vents on the front right here that slides right in, and that's where it runs it. Now, if you were to look at a 3D rendering of that module, you would actually see inside of that is a full-blown hard drive. Like the module consists of it looks like a laptop hard drive soldered onto a motherboard. And that's what it is it's just a Linux version of Unity that boots up off that hard drive and uses that for storage. The AIM module is useful because you can actually put that into routers like the 2801. That's my favorite router right now. 2801 router that don't have network modules. You just have those little WIC and VIC slots that you slide your modules in. This is it's literally just a little board. It looks like a little mini motherboard with a flash chip. And that flash chip is where it stores all the voicemail and messages and things like that. It's also Linux based. It boots up off the flash chip and so on. Now the benefit of the AIM module is that there's no moving parts, meaning less to break down, and it can slide in without eating up a full network module. The drawback is it doesn't have as much voicemail storage as the network module version, which runs a full hard drive, which gets into the gigs of storage, whereas the AIM module is limited. It's in the gigs, but it's much smaller than a hard drive can support. So this is Linux-based. It supports why did IVR just slip my mind? Interactive voice routing. Interactive voice routing. We'll say it stands for that, and I'll verify that right after I record this. Interactive voice routing. That's where you call in and you get an automated voice system where, press 1 to go here, press 2 to go here. You can, press 3 to go to the sales department, all those kind of things. Voicemail can be retrieved from email, web, or phone. Now, we're moving to a style of voicemail where we're going to see more things like this. Now, I know that's the iPhone, but this is how the iPhone handles voicemail, where you actually actually see visually your voicemail, or you can get it in an email attachment or whatever you want. You can just click on it and get it that way, because we don't have to have, call in, press 1 to hear, and then, oh, what was it? 3 to fast forward or 7 to fast forward? Oh, I deleted the message. All those kind of things. You can very simply see it from a menu style interface. Now, as you outgrow 100 users, you can move up to the Unity connection, which is the one bundled with Call Manager or Communication Manager Business Edition. This one scales up to 500 users if you run it on the same server as the Communication Manager, meaning the all-in-one box. If you run it on a separate box, that's where you can scale up to 7,500 users. Again, no redundancy, but it's meant to be kind of an all-in-one solution. Now, it supports advanced call routing rules that the Unity Express does not, meaning you can route calls based on different criteria and scripts and things like that, whereas Unity Express is simply a voicemail system that runs inside of a router. No redundancy on this guy. The full-blown Cisco Unity is where you have one or more redundant servers. That's one of the keys, is redundancy comes into play here. And this one gives you all the features of the other two Unities, plus it integrates directly with Microsoft Exchange, Lotus Notes, or Novell GroupWise email systems, so that it literally transfers messages directly into that system rather than acting as an outside email server that sends an email with the voicemail attached. It's a little more efficient and gives you a little more flexibility with how that integration works. So now let's look at the other applications that exist on our networks, or that we can add to our voice over IP networks for additional functionality. The first one is the Interactive Voice Response. See, that is what it stood for. IVR. This is where you have an automated system that can guide callers through certain information. Now, the most popular use of this is an auto attendant, meaning you call into a company, instead of getting a receptionist, you say, press 1 for sales, press 2 to dial by extension, or 0 for an operator, that kind of thing. But IVR can get into a lot of other advanced applications, like when you look at online banking, or when you call into a bank and it reads you your account balance. That's typically done through an IVR system, or just gathering information of the sky's the limit. There's many different things that you can call in and get information over the telephone, and that's all using IVR. The next one down is Unified Contact Center Express, or Unified Contact Center is the full-blown one. That's if you want to run a call center. That's where you have people calling in, waiting in queue. You are the 10th caller in queue. Your estimated wait time is 5 minutes. And, the sales group is answering calls, and you can get advanced reports on those calls and things like that. Call Manager or Communication Manager doesn't support the advanced queuing features like that. So that's where you would need the Unified Contact Center Express application. Meeting Place is your conference call application. That's where if you want to do big conference calls beyond the scope of what a normal conference call would be, like if you just want, hey, let's bring Mary on the line, conference, you dial Mary and she's on. All of the communication manager software, the device processing software can do that. Meeting Place is useful when you want to get big conference calls or video conference calls, or security on the conference calls, like dial PIN numbers to get into the conference call and all that kind of stuff. Unified Mobility, this is one that's actually bundled with the Business Edition of Communication Manager. This one, it's primarily to give people a single contact number, to where you can have one contact number that they call, and it dials or rings all the different ways that you can be reached, and that includes desk phone, instant messenger, your cell phone could go off. So it's kind of like a unified place to track those mobile users. And then finally, Emergency Responder is an application that allows you to have a emergency tracking system. So when somebody dials 911, their correct location information can be delivered to the 911 providers. Now it sounds like, oh, well, everybody needs that. Well, not if you don't have roaming users. Cisco and Voice over IP is one of the first places where our users can move around, whether they're using soft phones that runs on laptops, or they're unplugging their phone and moving to a different office without reconfiguring anything, because Voice over IP can do that. Well, the problem is if somebody's on a laptop and they're in one office or the other, you need to be able to provide location information based on where they are at that moment. So if you have the, and I love the term, if you look at the marketing information, they say if you have nomadic users, and I always think of cows, moving around, mobile users that take their phones with them, that's where you need the emergency responder. Those are the core pieces of a Cisco voice network. Now we're going to get to the endpoints in the next nugget. That's going to be where all of these things are demystified. But we have seen in this one probably the most important piece of that voice infrastructure model. The model that Cisco created that describes all the different pieces of the voice network, from the infrastructure to the call processing to the applications to the endpoints. Each one of those layers can have distinct devices that run the voice network. Now we looked at the call processing options, which is the call manager or communication manager, be it down at the low level, the UC500 all in one box, to Call Manager Express, to the Unified Communications Manager Business Edition, to the full-blown Communication Manager. And finally, we looked at the additional applications from Unity to IVR to Meeting Place, all those different applications that add functionality to your voice network. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.